Good morning.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Like that?
That was really
like
cool.
That? You
that
like
was
that?
really cool. Yes.
Yeah, it's a little, it's super weird and random, but that's where we're at. That's where we are. We're here at Yaki Coffee Chats. Good morning, everybody. And I'm here with
Saul Lopez.
Ooh.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Saul, who are you? I always like to put people on the spot,
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Who is Saul?
Who is Saul Lopez? What defines me the most today, right? I would say is my career as a financial advisor. I put my heart and soul into that, and that's who I am as an individual. I say that's kind of what's taking most of my life for the moment. But yeah, that's who I am right now.
Well, I think you're so much more than that, Saul.
Yeah, I have a lot of hats, I like to say. I have a lot of name tags.
No, he's just being silly. But no, truly, you are such a light. You're such a light. You're such a, sense of support and openness and welcomeness and friendly and all these things. You work hard, but you have a good heart.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I'm also terrible at taking compliments.
You know what someone told me? They're like, just say thank you. That's it.
Yeah, no,
that's it. Don't even.
I always appreciate when folks say anything good about me. I always do appreciate it, but it's always been this thing that's I don't know. It's hard to take in, right? It's hard to take in.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that.
Well,
y'all on the camera, y'all heard that, right? I'm a good person.
He's a good person. He is, and it was. It's been a delight getting to know you, and I'm very happy that you're here with me to drink some coffee. And you're already on your second donut over here. Look at him.
I'm moving in.
Look at him. He's the first guest. You're the first one to be like, you know what? I'm gonna eat my donut already. You're like, I'm just gonna go.
Yeah. Anybody who's been around me knows, if there's food around, or if you offer me anything, I'm taking it most of the time, right? So yeah, I'm gonna be snacking on that throughout this whole.
Please do. Obviously, as I, invite people to have coffee with me and donuts, and what are we going to talk about? And I think one of the first times that we actually sat down and talked, we had coffee.
Yeah, we did.
Coffee helps with that. And I don't know, it was, we were going to just chat, and I feel like we opened up deeper, and which was a nice surprise to feel that sort of vulnerability from you. And you shared with me a little bit about who you are beyond this financial stuff, who you are, Saul, as a person, because a lot of times we see people who are successful, who are thriving, and you're like, what is it about? What's underneath that, and what gets them to that point? And one thing that you'll learn today, and the topic today is tenacity. And tenacity specifically, what does that look like in the lens of mental health? Because pushing yourself, being determined, there's also, I do believe that there's a component of mental health that kind of shapes it or impacts that sort of spirit. So I guess, like I said earlier, we're going to start with a very broad question to you. What does tenacity mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has a different definition for tenacity. It's kind of, there's always levels to things, right? And we all experience life very differently, right? Everybody has their own sets of challenges, things that they have to overcome. To me, tenacity has been my escape from how I grew up, where I'm trying to go, just the ability to continue to push forward when things don't seem like they're there, the ability to push forward when the mountain seems too high to climb, right? And refusing to say no, right? I have this saying that I say in the office that I tell everybody, you're gonna have to come and see me one day, right? You're gonna have to come and check in with me, and that's been a reoccurring theme in my life for as long as I can remember, right? You're gonna have to come and see me. You gotta check in. Yeah.
Wow. And I it's funny you say that, and I you'll see that I'm gonna stop you along the way, because there's these little things that I pick up when people are saying, and it's for me, as soon as you said, there's these big mountains to climb, and that are before you, and yet you're and your spirit is bring it on. I feel like you're just I don't, and I think there's context there that I'd like, if possible, for you to share with everyone, because I think, your that's something I want to bring to the place. Like your life experience has sort of has sort of played a role in how you see the world, and hopefully it shapes other people to show like how you can start seeing the world, how your perspective can change. So do you mind sharing a little bit about how someone comes to
where do I come from?
Yeah.
There's always these like interesting questions like where do you come from, right? How did you get to where you are today?
Yes.
And for people that have known me for a good chunk of my life, night and day, right? From people that meet me today, they just have this, preconceived notion of how I look. I always tell people, it's like, don't let the tie fool you guys. Like, I grew up in Santa Ana. I'm from Mexico, right? There's a lot of layers behind it, but to give you kind of the long rundown story of where I come from, how I got here. Mm-hmm. So I was born in León, Guanajuato, down in Mexico, right? I didn't spend too much time there. I think I was there for maybe a couple of years, and next my family is flying out to TJ, to Tijuana, right across the border down south. And from there, we came to the States. And I think I was here from like 3 to 7 years old. Unfortunately, one of my mom's brothers got in a really bad accident. And my mom was like, pack bags, guys. Like, we're going to Mexico for a year. And I think that was always the plan, right? We're going to go to the motherland. We're going to spend a year there, meet family, and then we're coming back to the States.
Do you remember being 7 years old? And do you remember being like, this is going to be cool? Were you like, I don't want to leave? Like, do you remember what you were feeling about that move?
I don't remember how I felt about it. I think I was just like, cool, we're leaving, right? Like, we're packing bags, we're going to a new place.
Okay.
Never thought about like, what is it gonna be like when I go into school there? Yeah. It's like, I know Spanish, but I'm not growing up in Mexico, right? So for some reason, none of that came to my mind. It was more like, our family is going through something. And at that time when mom said something, it was
like, okay,
all right,
let's go.
Let's do it. Now, where things got a little complicated was my dad had been in the States, I think, since like the 80s, right? Working his ass off like always. And he had fixed papers for my siblings, except for my mom. There was some deeper issues there that we weren't able to get through. But the plan was, hey, while you guys are in Mexico for that year, dad is going to take care of fixing papers for mom, so you could come back all, fine and dandy.
Yeah.
And we spent the year out in León, and then we come back to TJ for the summer, and supposedly everything is being, finalized. And lo and behold, we find out that the lawyer my dad was working with wasn't necessarily doing what he was supposed to be doing. Later on, we found out my mom had, some penalties on her record, and they put like annual penalties, right? It's like, no, you can't do anything to make time go faster. It's just like, you got to wait a certain amount of years. So that summer that we were supposed to spend in TJ turned into this, I think it was like 6-7 years.
6-7 years.
Yeah, like we were there for quite some time. And at that time, I was a very introverted kid.
You were?
Yeah, I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to go out and play with the kids. And my mom, I remember one time was like, you need to get out this house, boy. So she like grabbed me. She was like, I'm done with you just being in here, right? Like, you need to go and make friends. And I think that was probably one of the best things that my mom ever did for me, because I am a little bit of a social butterfly type.
Yeah. But everyone's like, Saul.
On the back end, I think I'm very private. In my mind, I'm like, I'm kind of private. It's like, no, you're not. Like, you'd love to talk, right? So we're in TJ. My mom is like, okay, open the door. She puts me outside. And she's like, the kids hang out at the store, so you go and find the kids. And I show up, and I have siblings, right? My siblings were already out and about talking to everybody. So I show up, and it's like, yeah, this is, our brother. And I was just kind of like, hi, right? But no, when people ask me, where are you from, right? I always say, I'm from Tijuana, I'm from TJ, because that's where my mind was being shaped.
Yeah, your formative years were there.
Yeah, I think I was probably from the time I was 9 until 14, 15, that's most of that childhood where you get shaped. And there was pros and cons to that, but there's a lot of things that I've learned to appreciate in my life today because of the experience that I had there. When people talk about Mexico, one of the biggest things that stands out to me is always the people. And to this day, I'm like, I had friendships over there that I have not been able to replicate here, right?
What is it you think that about the people that you...
I think, and this is the odd part, when I was growing up there, I didn't know we were struggling, right? Like, I didn't know we were in this place that was like down bad crazy. Because even when I lived in TJ, a lot of people sometimes think like, oh, well, you're from the States, right? You're probably living in some good looking homes out there. Right. I tell people, funny enough, I always say it. When I was growing up in TJ, working doorknobs in a home was a luxury that not many people could afford, right? Yeah. So that's kind of how I was growing up. But the funny part about it is like when nobody has working doorknobs, it's like you don't really think about it. It's just what it is, right?
You don't know what you don't have,
Exactly. Yeah. So one thing to answer your question, right? One thing that brought us together is that we were all going through this experience together, right? There was no hiding from it. We're just like, how do we make the best out of this? And I have really awesome like memories from us trying to go through summer and have fun. One thing that we would do, and this is a little ridiculous, but we would go out and there'd be like 10, 12 kids, right? And be like, all right, we're gonna spread out in teams. And like, you're gonna go to that neighborhood, you're gonna go to this neighborhood over here, and we're all gonna try to collect cans. Right now, we tried to cheat the system because when we brought them back, we tried to put like dirt in it, and then we tried to like squeeze them so hard, and we're like, if they didn't make any noise, right, they weighed heavier, so that means we got a little bit more money, right, a little more cheddar.
It's intelligent.
So, and the purpose for that was so we could all go and sell them together, and all 12 of us, or however many people we had, could go and grab the bus, essentially just so we could pay money so we can get on the bus, go to the beach, and then buy sandwiches and stuff just to like hang out there. But it's like, again, like you don't think about it. It was just like, this is what we're doing today.
It's such a community group, like
everybody knows everybody.
Everybody's just helping each other out. Yeah,
and those are memories that, if you were looking at it from an outside perspective, almost seemed like, damn, that's kind of a little sad, or like, that kind of sucks. But when you lived it, it's like, no, dude, like that was an awesome memory. Like just collaborating with other kids in the neighborhood. And again, we're all going through the same thing. So there was no shame to it. It was just like, yo, this is what we got to do to go to the beach. Like, we're going to go ahead and do it and go to the beach and have a great time.
It's a beautiful
and we would have a blast.
thing.
Yeah, we would have a blast. But it was memories like that and the people that I was meeting there that made that experience over there so valuable, so rich for me. So
and it makes sense now when you said earlier, you're like, when at work, when you're like, you tell people, you're like, come check in with me. So I feel like you have this sort of ability to, like, you've used your experience to figure out a way to help other people through this.
Yeah.
I feel like, right? You're like, I feel like you're this sort of source of people can come to you because you've experienced certain things that you're just like, like,
I try to tell my story to inspire others, right? There might be someone out there who just came from Mexico and is like, damn, excuse me, this mountain just looks crazy high, and maybe I don't want to go for it, right? And I can be that person, like, hey, I came and I went for it, and things kind of worked out. And to no point, I would never say, oh, it was easy, it was a walk in the park, right? Like, I was cruising by it. Like, no, it was hard as hell, and it's never been easy, but the grass is greener on the other side, right? The grass is greener on the other side. So to get from that point to this point, you got to make some sacrifices, right? You got to be willing to put in the work. It's not gonna be handed to you. But life is very long. I always tell people,
I like that.
I hate when people tell me like, oh, like time goes by so fast, and everything is so, quick, and life is fast. And I'm like, where? Like, I'll give you my little philosophy on why that.
Let's hear it. We want to hear it.
So we spend the first 18 years of our lives trying to learn how to be a human being, right? Like we try to learn what a proper human should do in society, right? And after 18, you become an adult, and then it takes you another like 7 years, maybe in your mid-20s. You're like, okay, like I pay bills, I do this, you know, I've had my pains and struggles, and at that point, you've been an adult, a conscious adult, for only 7 years, right? You're in your mid-20s, you're 25, you're expected to do 50 more years at least, hopefully, right? Knock on wood. That's 50 years of that same adult consciousness repeatedly, right? Like it just, to me, you know, I tell people, I'm 27 now, I'm turning 28 in December. And when people meet me, right, or clients that are older, they'll be like, how old are you? And I'll be like, I'm 27. It's like, you seem so much older, like the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, X, Y, and Z, right? And I tell them a little bit about my story. And it's just like, the reason that is because I've been running so fast for so long. So I tell people, it's like, listen, I'm 27, but I'm tired like a 40-year-old. And when in my mind, I think about like, oh, I got 50 more years of this, right? Of this human experience. It's like, that's a whole lot, right? And I think where people lose that sense is they don't reflect. And I oftentimes, like, I'll go back and I have a paper calendar. I have very specific things that I use to go back and see what happened in June, right? What happened in May?
Really? You do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And slow and surely, I'll be like, damn, it's been a long 6 months, and I gotta do another 6 months this year, and that's just 1 year. I was like, oh Lord, like,
okay,
I'm
so
done.
So this perspective, I have so many questions.
Yeah,
but one at a time, right? I'm like, okay, so you just mentioned how you've been running, and you've that's probably what people see is like you've been determined, and you've reached some great accomplishments. Mm-hmm. Now that as you're welcoming year 28, is it? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Do you how are you feeling about, like, do you ever, when you're reflecting, are you thinking about, like, what are you thinking when it comes to mental health? Are you thinking like should I slow down? Should I keep going? Like, how do you kind of gauge your own everyone has their own limitations and their own sort of ways of living. How do you feel about it?
Yeah. Can I give you a long-winded answer?
We're here for you.
For that?
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it.
It is very important that even when you are trying to run 110 miles an hour all the time, you need to have a rest day, right? The reason for that, because I've been through a burnout, right? So kind of transitioning from when I was growing up in TJ to when I came to the States, my landing zone is Santa Ana. That's the city I rep, right? When people ask me where I'm from here, I was like, I'm from Santa Ana. Yeah. So when I was growing up in TJ, people would always tell me, everybody in the States that is from Mexico is working their ass off, giving it their all, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew the time was eventually gonna come when I was gonna move back here. So I was always cautious to remember what I was being told and to live up to that expectation. So when I showed up, I was like, all right, where's the mountain? How high is it? What do I need to do, right?
Ready.
I was ready to jump.
Can we take a minute to think about that for a second? Because I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, like 14, right? Like what the
hell? Like what do you, like, looking back in hindsight, what do you think where that came from? Was it like
I love this question because when there's a close friend of mine, his name is Emerith Grijalva, and
hi dude.
Well, yeah, shout out to him. One time we were talking and we were fairly close, and he gave me that question. It's like, when did you know that you wanted to pursue things, that you had high ambitions? Mm-hmm. And I told him, I was like, you know what sucks about that question is that I don't remember a time where that wasn't the case. Mm. So and that brings me to something else where it's like, I see kids now that are like in their early 20s, and they're like, boom, I know what I want to do, and they have this like new energy to them,
desire.
And that energy, I'm a little bit envious to that, because I'm like, dude, I've had that for so long, and I'm a little tired. So to see somebody like discover it in their 20s, I'm like, oh, that would have been a lot better, but
you're like, oh, I should have done that.
But it's that consciousness has always been there in one way or another, and I don't know what shaped it, but that's just the way the mind has always been. So
yeah, you keep saying it's so fun. It's good that you said it a couple of times now. Consciousness, this conscious, because we talk a lot about this on our channel. Is that like, and I think this is a good way to talk about also your tenacity here. Is that like, I think like, as I am learning too through my guests and through therapy, is like making those conscious decisions, being intentional about the choices you make, so that it could, take you closer to where you want to be, what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that looking back, because I bet 14-year-old Saul probably didn't know, I don't know, maybe he didn't know what that was all about, but do you feel like in a really cool way, can you be like, dang, like this is where I'm supposed to be? Like that 14-year-old Saul would be like really proud. Like can you reconcile that?
Yeah. I can't remember when, but I think it was sometime last week that I did ask myself that question. Okay. I reflect a lot. I tell people, like, I'm my own best friend. Like,
I love this, dude.
I talk to myself all the time. I'll be like, just going back and forth. Are we high-fiving?
Yeah, we're high-fiving.
Yes. But I was reflecting on that, and oftentimes when I'm in this thought process, I was thinking about, what would my younger version of myself say? And part of it would be that younger self didn't know how hard it was gonna be, right? And
like naive in a good way?
Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit about how positive I was going through this journey. Like, it was just like, you couldn't shake me, right? Like, you just, whatever you put in front of me, it was just like, all right, like, what do I got to do to get through it?
We're going to definitely talk about that.
Yeah. But I think the younger version of myself would be very proud. And I live a very simple life, right? There's two things that I want to accomplish. One of them is, for me as an individual, to be a better person every day, right? So when my time comes, I could leave the earth and just be like, I did that, right? I wasn't perfect, but I really tried to continue to grow and be better. And the other part is the community and people around me, right? I want, when I leave the earth, that the community around me is better because of what I tried to do for them. And those two things are like at the top of my pyramid in terms of what carries me forward, right? Like, and I didn't have that purpose all the time. And I'll talk a little bit about where that came from too.
Okay.
But yeah, when I came from the States, I'm in school and I didn't know English. Like, it wasn't a thing.
When you came back at 14.
Yeah, because I had a first grade education when we left, right?
Right.
And I was gone for like 7 years, so it was like, when I came back...
That's huge. That's a huge like a barrier in terms of trying to integrate yourself back into the...
And there was a church in the community where I was growing up in TJ, and there was a family that came from, I think it was from San Diego, that they would come and essentially run our choir, right? And their kids... would speak English, and it was like, oh, like, don't you know English? And I'd be like, I know how to say hi, how are you? But if you try to talk to me, like,
oh my God.
I'm not gonna be able to hold that, right?
Yeah.
So when I came from Mexico here, I tell people, it's like, I couldn't speak, I couldn't write, and I couldn't read, right? So I was, hey, here's 3 English classes. Now I will say the little experience that I did have as a 6-7-year-old did help in recapturing and learning everything, because by the time I was a freshman, sophomore in high school, I was pretty much head to head with people that had been here their whole lives, right? But I will say this, that took a lot of sleepless nights.
I was gonna say, how?
That took a lot of sleepless nights, and shout out to my mom. My mom would always make me coffee at like 10 p.m. at night, and I'd be up until like, 3, trying to finish off and just trying to catch up, right? And that's what I meant. Like, I was trying to run that much faster than everyone else so I could play catch up, right? That was my whole journey.
I'm gonna stop you right here, okay? This is a very important moment. Because to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like any 14-year-old would be like, I feel like, I'm not gonna generalize, but I feel like I'm gonna think about me as a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, if something feels like so this idea of catch up, like I feel like from a mental health perspective, like you were laser focused. You were just like, despite how hard this is going to be, despite how unfair, truly, I'm sure, this is, you're like, I'm going to do this. And to me, my question to you is like, I know you're not 14 anymore, but like, I'm just trying to get into your head, man. Like, how do you, because I feel like whatever that was for you is what continues to make you like go for,
a little crazy. Yeah.
I mean, but you're here and you still have that smile on your face. Like you're so graceful. But I know that you're working really hard, and I think there's this, I guess I'm just trying to figure out like, what is that thing in your brain you think that kind of like grounded you and like you're like, I'm gonna stick with this and I'm not gonna
yeah, there's a couple of answers to that question. One of them being my family, right? Like my parents made a lot of sacrifices to get our asses over here, and at that time it was like, okay, I think if I was a betting person and I'm looking at our siblings, right, I feel like the money was like, hey, Saul, like, you better make something happen, right? And I always remember the kids that I grew up with in TJ, right? When you grow up in Mexico, and a lot of people don't know this, you got to pay to go to high school. Again, if I'm living in a neighborhood where doorknobs are a luxury, like, how many people are able to afford to send their kids to high school? So, you get to 15 over there, and then you're just kind of like, lingering around, like you don't know what to do, right?
That's great. Yeah.
So when people tell me it's like, oh, it's hard to do it here, it's like, yeah, but it's fucking doable. Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Sure.
Okay. That was one of my biggest questions that I forgot to ask.
No, because people have been cursing here and there, and then I started to curse. But then I realized YouTube is being a little bit better about it.
Yeah.
They just don't want you to curse like within the first like couple minutes of the video.
Oh, I was good about it too.
So you didn't start the interview like fucking Jackie.
I think about those kids that really didn't have an opportunity, and then here I come, right? And I've never thought anything like special about me, right? I was like, I'm not crazy talented, right? I'm smart, but I'm not crazy smart. I'm okay at things, right? But
oh my God,
there was always one thing that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna work harder than everybody else. And that was the immigrant mentality that I grew up with, right? It was, if you work hard enough, things will eventually work out. So I was like, say less, that's what we're gonna do. But during that whole journey, I would always go back to the kids that I grew up with and be like, would they be crying and quitting if they were here?
Wow.
I'd be like, some of those kids would have done amazing things here.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I can't be the one that got lucky, right, and came here and not live up to it. So early on at 14, I think that was the two things that was top of my list. And my little sisters, they were very young, and to me it was like, oh, they need an example, right? They need somebody that they can look up to and be like, oh, well, brother's doing it, I'll do it, right? So
how are they doing?
They're doing great. I mean, one of them just graduated from high school. Relationships are a little iffy here and there, but I've tried to be as supportive and try to provide as much, of my experience to them to try to encourage them to do better. But I think when I was 14, 15, 16, I think those were the top two things in my mind. It was like, we got to make this work.
I do want to pause here and acknowledge that, like, that's why it's, I appreciate you sharing your life experience, because the truth is, like, this is very unique to, part of your immigrant experience. And there's a lot of people out there who, have the privilege of not being able, they may not have that drive. And so I'm always like in awe of that. Like, for me, my dad was an immigrant, and he worked really hard. And so I did have my own privilege too, because my dad came from Mexico, and he also worked hard, and he's retired now. He's an electrical engineer, and so he was able to nurture me and my siblings and I. But the funny thing is that it was like he kind of he overdid it, like he over coddled us. But he did show us, obviously determination. I love you, Dad. Like, yes, like he did show us the power of hard work and education, everything like that. But I'll never know what he went through. I'll never have that immigrant experience where he also went to university out here in University of Michigan. But he told me, he's like, I told them I knew English, and he didn't really know English, and he worked just like you. Well, he wasn't 14 though. You were 14. Dude. He was like in his early 20s, and he was like. And he was like, I'm going to keep the scholarship, and I'm going to work here, and I'm going to stay here. And I've recently talked to some of my friends who have immigrant parents, and we're like second generation, where they're like, a lot of time at that time of like the age of our parents is like, it was all about like financial security. And I think the new wave of us is like, where am I going with this? This happens. I get like off a trail, and then I don't know where I'm going with this.
I think where you were going, like our generation just has different issues to deal with. We're living in a different world.
But you are similar in what our parents went through. Like, you literally had to come and.
Oh yeah, when people ask me like, "Oh, are you like first generation?" I was like, "No,
you
bro.
are
like, I got the thing. I'm from Mexico. I'm Gen Zero. Baby. I got the Mexican flag.
So I think to me this is such a unique. It's special to have you here because it's such a unique thing. It's like to remind ourselves like, no, it's not just like our parents who have to meet someone. It's like. Not like I'm meeting my dad right now, but you remind me a lot of my father.
Version, right?
You remind me a lot of my father, and where am I going with this? I don't know where I'm going with this, but this happens, right? This happens. This happens if you see my stuff. But my point is that I think it for me it definitely gives perspective of like you think about people who are driven like this, and it's like. I don't know what it feels like. What you're saying right now, you're like, yeah, it's true. It's like you took advantage. You took the opportunity, and you're like, I don't want to let these people down. And I think that is. I think it's. I'm just taking a moment to say like that is remarkable because not everyone. We're privileged. So like me, I'm privileged that I didn't have to have that on my back, and yet you've done this so gracefully. Is what I'm trying to say. It's like, you use the power of your story, and I love that. 1 second, we're gonna take a little break. So I'm back. I was very intimidated by your tie and your attire. So I thought, why not wear a blazer? Because I was going off on a tangent, and it was like, I felt very like, out of it. So I feel like this blazer is gonna get me on your level. It's gonna
rope us back in.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. Okay, because even in our little intermission right now, we were talking about so many things. So I'm like, we got to get back to this. So
yeah.
So let's go. So basically, when I was rambling, by the way, I was basically saying like, I really admire that you took this experience that you had, and you used it as fuel to push yourself to accomplish things that you really wanted to, and to give back and all the stuff that you're doing right now. So just anyways, kudos to you.
Thank you.
But we should probably go back to, you already talked to us. He has a timeline. It's all a good thing. So let's talk about now when you're in college or after that.
Still in high school.
Oh, right.
And I know the theme today is like tenacity.
Yeah.
And when I first moved here, there was a lot of obstacles in the way for me to get to where I wanted to be, but I was always very passionate about education, right? And it was the only thing that I was kind of good at. You know, I could go to school, learn, pass a test. So when I came to the States, it was, okay, we should probably aim to go to college, right? That should be our number one goal. And for that to happen, you know, there was, you know, learning how to speak, how to read, how to write, at a level that was acceptable in a college application, right? So that was kind of the number one goal was to get there. And that focus on this one thing made everything else very irrelevant. I often get asked, like, oh, how was the culture shock? I was like, culture shock? I didn't
have time to.
I was like, I didn't have any eyes to think about like me coming from TJ and how different it was here. There was only a couple of things, like I couldn't walk in the middle of the street anymore. Like that wasn't a thing here, right? And TJ, I was like, you know, walking down the street. But other than that, it was like, this is where I'm going, and you're either walking with me or you need to get out of the way, right? Like, that's where I'm going.
And you're 14. Let's like remind people you're 14, and this is where your brain is at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was no like pause or break. And I'll talk a little bit about how that affected me later. But you know, when you don't have an option to pause, you just keep going. But yeah, by the time I was like a sophomore, learning how to, you know, essentially be average, right? And I had a little bit of an accent. People would be like, oh, you know who you remind me of? You remind me of Fez from that 70s show.
No.
Yeah, and you know, I had people in my life who just be like, hey, you want to maybe pronounce that a little bit better? And sometimes people get real offended about that, or they think that I was like offended about it. But I tell people I knew the mountain that I had to climb, and to get there, I didn't want to get to the top of it and be in a job interview or something like that and be overlooked because people wouldn't be able to understand me. And I knew that could happen at some point. So I would be like, I would welcome that feedback, right? I'd be like, no, tell me, and then tell me how to do it right. But I didn't practice on the accent. I always get the question, how did you get rid of it? It was like, well, one, you know, I had that background, but two, it was reading out loud, which I still do. Sorry to the people in my office that, you know, have to hear me read out loud and stuff. And rap music, right? Like rap music, trying to recite, like, you know, that was what led me to that, to whatever I sound like today.
Do you know any rap songs right now?
Not anything. Music has like, I've had a you know, a height in music, and then I'll come down and not listen to anything. Now I just listen to music passively, but I don't like, I have to memorize so many other things that trying to memorize a song, I'm just like, I can't do it.
You know, I'll ask him later. So you're in high school. You're laser focused. You're open to feedback. You're wanting to grow and expand. And you know, in your high school career, were there ever moments where you're like, you know what, this is too hard. I'm going to take a break. I want to give up. Like, did that ever cross your mind?
Not when I was in high school. And I do have one moment so far in this life that I've had that experience where it was like, that, you know, put me in a place where I was like, I'm done, you know, I'll quit. But that didn't come until later on in life. When I was in high school, it was just like, I got to run the motions, you know, I got to try to catch up. And when you could see progress, it makes it easier to go through the motions, because I was like, yo, I came here, I was in 8th grade, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. I'm a sophomore now, I could do this, I could do that. I'm a junior, I'm a senior, and I'm right there in like the top like 5-10% of the class, right? So I was like, I could see the progress, and what at some point seemed like ridiculous, right, now was semi-reality, right? So when I get to be a senior, I'm applying to go to schools, and my Cal State applications, and I'm fumbling the details here, but for some reason they weren't able to process my applications. So the applications never really got reviewed, which was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 different Cal States. So my UC applications, and just to remind everyone, I had a 4.0 GPA, but it wasn't your AP honors classes. It was like bone average, right? Like it was just as good as I could be at that time. So
that's still great.
Yeah, and my application was just, it was a resume of like a little sad story of like, hey, look at where I started, look at where I'm at today, and think about where I could be at if you welcome me into an institution, right? And I got accepted to 2 different schools. One of them was UC Davis. Now that letter came.
It's a great school.
Pretty soon. Yeah. The only issue with that school is that it was, I don't know, 10 hours up north.
Yeah, you'd have to move.
And here's the problem with that. Even when I was growing up, my parents always tried to provide us with everything that they could, right? We had food on our table and a roof over my head, and that's what mattered most to us, right? So I would never doubt them for anything. But when I, pitched the idea of like, hey, can I move over there? It was like, well, we ain't got no money to send you over there, and I don't know how you're gonna figure it out if you go up there, right? So even though it was a possibility, it seemed very improbable that it would actually happen. So I'm like lingering on this on this acceptance letter for a while, and I'm just like, damn. And here comes, good old Chapman Red with this like Hail Mary pass.
Oh man.
Sends me a welcome letter for their spring semester.
Okay.
I'm a first-gen student. Like, my parents don't speak any English. Like, I barely have any family out here. None that were like close or anything. So I'm just stoked that I get accepted. I don't even know what spring semester means, right? I'm just like, yeah, so I'll come
You're in,
sure. Right? Accepted is accepted, right? So
done.
It was a done deal from there.
Oh man. Now,
when I get that acceptance letter, I take it to mom, right? And mom is like crying. It's very emotional because she saw a lot of the work that I was doing. Again, she'd be like 10 p.m. making me coffee so I could get through my homework assignments and whatever. And I was always very slow with every project because when I was first learning English, I had to translate everything from Spanish to English. I don't do that anymore, but
that's an extra step that you had to take with everything.
It was tough, and you have to proofread everything extra hard because you're not doing it right. So I get accepted to Chapman, and I'm like, okay, spring semester. I graduate in June. I'll get a summer job, and that job came and it stayed, right? I was working at La Quinta in Santa Ana, and the people there, my managers, were awesome people. They're very great. And during that time, I buy a car, I get enough things for myself, and like 2 weeks before I'm supposed to start school, I get a letter from the Chapman office. And this is the only time that I'll like ding Chapman for like little bullshit, right? They send me this like, hey, do you want to come live on campus? And I'm like, yes, right? Because at that time I wasn't thinking about dollar signs.
Right.
All I was thinking about is having the experience and working my ass off while I'm there to get through it.
Yeah.
But to a lot of people, a lot of my peers that got accepted to other schools, I know some of them that said, how much is it going to cost me? I'm not going there. That's ridiculous, right? And to each their own, but one thing that I have told my sisters and other young people that I've met is if you're going to go to college, know what you're trying to do, or at least have a good idea. And don't go in there to be a C's get degrees type of person, because that's a lot of money to pay just to go and be average. Like go there with a purpose, right? So
say that again for the people in the back.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Don't go be a C's get degrees person when you're going to college and spending thousands of dollars. It makes absolutely no sense. Find something else, something that you're passionate about, right? But at that time, I was like, I know this is my path. So how much does it cost to go to Chapman at that time? It was like $50,000.
Oh my God.
I was like, I don't even know what that means, right?
That's insane.
And they gave me a scholarship to pay for half, right? The other half was on me.
Okay.
And to me, it was like, it is what it is, right? Like, that'll get paid at some point. Not today, but because I'm willing to do the work, it'll eventually get to that point. So I didn't shy away from the dollar amount. But yeah, they sent me this thing to come and live on campus.
Okay.
Now, usually when you're a freshman, right, you go to orientation and you're supposed to bring your parents. And I didn't know that. And
you didn't know that?
No, and at this time, I'm like driving myself. I pay my bills. Like I'm taking care of myself to some extent. So I was like,
how old were you? Were you 18 or you were a little older?
No, I was 19.
You were 19.
Yeah, because it was in the spring semester, so December had already passed.
Right.
And I go in there. And there's like kids with parents at orientation. I was like, why are you guys here with your parents? It's like, hey, you're supposed to bring your parents. I was like, oh, word? Like, I had no idea, right? So that is, and I always say that little part just so people get an idea of how, not ignorant, but how much I didn't know about being a first gen student or being a college student overall. But I go in to live at these dorms, and
oh, you did?
Yeah, and it was in the senior dorms, which later on I found out Chapman was just trying to fill in a bed, right? So I didn't get all the
and it's only with all the freshmen and like.
That's where you get all the cool experiences and everything. But I was always working and going to school full time. Like that was a given. That from the moment it was never like, oh, should I be working? Should I not be working?
You were always doing full time both?
Yeah, it was always like, oh, you're gonna work and go to school full time.
Wow.
And in my head I was just like, whatever. Like it is what it is, right? So we just go through it.
Yeah.
So I go through that first semester at Chapman, and it's very intimidating. When I was in high school, I had a teacher, shout out Mr. Cush. He was like, Saul, you've done well enough here in a school in Santa Ana that is average at best, right? You're gonna go and compete at a private school with kids that come from way better circumstances and way better resources than you. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated the honesty. And at the same time, I was like, none of that matters. It's like, I still have
you were like, still like, that's
this
great.
is where I'm
You're
going.
Like, this is...
And at this point, I like built confidence. Right?
I was going to say,
at this point, I'm
that
like,
must be
look
true.
At where I started, look at where I'm at. Like, so what? I got to go and compete with some kids for 4 years? I promise you, is like...
Okay, you do you understand how hard it is for people to have that kind of confidence? Do you recognize that?
Yeah.
So any advice for anybody out there who needs to build their confidence? Like, what do you think has helped you, shaped that part of you? That's
you gotta find something that you really, really desire.
Okay.
There's always a why, right? Like I talked about my family, I talked about where I come from, and within you, it's like you gotta want better, and everybody wants better, but not everybody's willing to do the work, right? So you really gotta find what that better looks like, and have a clear image of it and chase it. But oftentimes, I think laziness is almost like a sickness, because I've seen a lot of people fall into laziness, and it's like, yeah, I want that. It's like, but I'm not willing to do the work, or I'm shy from it, right?
Or afraid of it.
Yeah, and when I was growing up through that, we were talking a little bit about this during a little break, and it was when I was growing up as an 8th grader in high school, I was a very angry kid, because when I showed up here, I was like, oh, everybody's gonna be working very hard, so I'm just gonna be average in that motion, right? And I show up and I'm looking around the kids in my community, and it's not the case, right? And that was angering to me, because I was like, you don't see the opportunity in front of you. And I'm thinking about the kids that I grew up with, thinking about what they would do if they had this opportunity, right? So every day I went to school, and I was just like, mad. I was just like, fuck, like, I wish you guys could see it, right?
Yeah.
No, excuse me. At that time, I'm just mad about it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't have the wisdom to reflect on it and to really know what their experience is like. I just thought about my experience and that aspect of it. But
You know that your experience is valid, though, right? Like that you probably like these other folks, and I even include myself in that. You know, that's why I do want to talk about the privilege that I think some of us don't realize at that young age that we have. But it's like we reflect, and it's like those people around you probably had privilege that you didn't, and do you look back now and you're like, do you think that anger comes from that? You think that you kind of knew? You're like, dude, these people don't realize like what they have.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's, And then how have you come from there and you have such a grace now? You're just like.
So, roping it back into my first semester at Chapman.
Okay.
I'm still there, and now I'm angry at two people. Now I'm angry at the people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And now I'm angry at the trust fund babies that I'm with. Yeah. And within my Chapman experience, I learned that I was wrong about both of them. Like I was wrong about both of them. And you have to, when you're growing up, especially when you're younger, like you gotta be able to say, I'm wrong and this is my lesson. And within those two things, there were very solidified things that I had beliefs about in my mind, but I was proven wrong. And starting with the kids that I was growing up with, when I showed up to Chapman, I was being successful there. But that first semester of like working full time and going to school full time, and I was working like graveyards over the weekends just to try to make more money. So I was going Friday, Saturday, Sunday, graveyard. I would get out on Monday morning at like 6 a.m., go to class at like 8 a.m. on Monday, finish off the Monday and go to sleep, and then transition back to normal people time, right? So I would think about how much that pushed me. And eventually it got to the place where I was like, this is hard. Like, this is very hard. So I thought about myself at this point again. I now have an image of myself where I'm like, you're a fairly capable person and you're fairly intelligent and, you're semi-talented. But I thought about the average person and I was like, what if you put that average person here in your place and you were like, go through it, do it, right? I would see a lot of people fall, right? And to this day, like, through all my experience, I'm like, very rarely have I met key individuals that I'm like, yo, if I put you in my shoes, you could go through it. But for the most part, I'm like, you'd probably fall apart. So it gave me an appreciation, even with my own siblings, right? Like I had a younger brother and I was like, yo, what are you doing, right? And then I thought about like him being in my shoes and I was like, dude, it's a lot of work and it sucks and it breaks you as an individual. And so it gave me an appreciation to say, even though it's doable, it's still very hard, and I could see why people would shy away from the experience, right? So if it's not what you want to do, it's not what you know deep inside that it's your path, then you probably don't want to go through that pain and struggle just to do it, right? So
what came to mind when you were saying this now? It made me think also, like, I hope that it also showed, to sound cheesy or whatever, but I hope that it also showed you and gave you appreciation of your own strength. Like your own ability to.
I think it was reinforcing at that time, like, like if someone's gonna do it, like it has to be you, right? Right. And that was my reflection on this is why people don't go and chase it, right? Because it's so difficult to do it. Now on the other end, we got trust fund babies having the time of their life in college, and meanwhile I'm over here dying. I wrote this essay and I minored in English, and one of my
Did you?
Yeah, because it was still like, you know English, but you don't know like English, right? Like you should continue to grow that,
dude.
So
amazing.
I wrote a paper called "Trapped in an Elevator," and the assignment was, hey, you should write a paper about your happy place. And
oh my God, I'm getting like, okay, tell me.
I wrote this paper called Trapped in an Elevator. And at this time, there is stuff happening at home, stuff happening in school. I'm working, I'm tired all the time. I'm addicted to coffee by that point. And I'm writing this paper about a happy place. And and the title of it is Trapped in an Elevator.
You made that title up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and the purpose of that was because where I lived in Sandu, 4th floor, and I had to take the elevator up and down every time I came in and out, right? Your phone does not work within that elevator.
Right.
So that was my happy place because it was a moment that little 10-second ride was like what I got of peace at that time.
Wow.
And when I
off the grid, right? Off the grid.
Yeah, and it was like just this little moment where I was like I could breathe a little bit. And as soon as those elevator door opens, it was like, you know, back to it.
Wow.
But I read this paper in front of our class, and you know, kids at Chapman.
She's a writer, so I don't know if she's hearing this.
Oh, you should look it up. And you know, these kids are writing about the beach or this like secret spot that they know of. And here I come, right? Like, yo, you guys want to hear about this like trapped in an elevator thing?
I love it, emo.
And it was a moment where I felt accepted at Chapman. I think a lot of times when you're going from, you know, where I was coming from to a school like that, people are like, oh, I have to change who I am to assimilate to this new place. And if there's one advice I could give to people that are going to a school or just in a new place that they've never been to, it's like, be yourself. Be yourself. I've been ghetto forever, right? So I'll be ghetto everywhere that I go. It's just who I am. So when I was telling this story,
I'm gay everywhere I go. Saul knows that. I'm gay everywhere I go.
So be you, right? Be you. People will appreciate the authenticity that they. So when I'm, you know, reading this paper, I finished reading it and I'm choking up the entire time. Like it was a bad read, right?
I want to read it.
And it's still somewhere out there.
Yeah.
It was I had to post it like on a blog and stuff. And I think the professor took it and published it in like a little like magazine or something.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember posting about it on Instagram. So the kids afterwards were like, thank you for sharing that. We appreciate the vulnerability. And that's where I was like, like not only am I here, but I'm being good here. Now, that was all fine and dandy, but then something, you know, I started receiving emails from our business office, and they were essentially just like, hey, Saul, you know how we covered that half? Well, you know, there's this other half that you have to pay us for. You know, you should come by and talk about that. And I'm like, you want money? I was like, okay. Go to the business office and I'm like, hey, I keep getting these emails. This is like 2 weeks before finals week.
And this is after your first year there?
No. This is first semester.
First semester
in the spring of 2015. And I'm there and they're like, yeah, you know, you should really look at what you owe and pay us. And I was like, okay, like I don't have any money. And they're like, oh, well, do your parents have money? And I'm like, no, my parents don't have money, right? And it's like, well, you could go get a loan. And I'm like, how do I do that, right? Like I was just like, tell me what to do, I will take care of it. And I go home and I grab my dad, and my dad is like, you're paying to go to school? Like, what?
When your dad asked that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this was the first time that I got like real with my dad, at least.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I'm not gonna go take out this loan so you could go to school. Like you should be working, right? And again, no fault to my dad. My dad only knows what he knows.
Yeah.
But I got real straight with him, and I was like, listen, Dad, you have 5 kids, and you made a lot of sacrifices, and you continue to make sacrifices today to have us here. For us just to be average and have exactly what we have today, I don't think so. It's like you have one shot. You have one shot at making this whole experience that you and Mom had to do worth it. And I'm sad to say, but this is like I would put all your marbles on me.
Damn!
So I was like, let's go to this bank and apply for this loan, right? So we show up to Wells Fargo, and at that time when we're applying for this loan, it was almost just like bad things happening all around, right? My older brother, who has, I don't talk about my older brother too much, and I probably won't mention too much about him today, but my brother has had an addiction problem for forever. You know, it's been over a decade of it. And, you know, in a household where I was kind of in charge of a lot of things at a very young age, that was something that also kind of got added onto it. So when I tell my story, people are always like, oh, that's so impressive. And I tell them, like, yeah, you don't know what was going on at home. Like that's and for anybody who like deals with, you know, someone in their family who's like an addict.
The camera shut off on us again. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but
this conversation is that hot, you know, is that heated. So
I did get a little crazy right now offline.
Yeah, we continue to, you know, because you're in the middle of a conversation, just because the camera's on or off, you know, you don't just stop, right? Yeah. So just kind of keep talking. You know, I remember where we were at. You want me to just bring it in?
Yeah. Bring it in.
We were talking about, you know, the money that I owed Chapman and me going to go get a loan. I was talking about the obstacle that came when me and my dad went to try to get this loan. My dad had co-signed a car for my older brother. And I think I was mentioning, you know, when you have somebody that, you know, is dealing with an addiction, it's like, you know, that's an obstacle within itself, that if you do have someone in your family who's going through that, one, don't let it get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish, you know, but also don't let it get to you too much, right? Addiction is we're talking a little bit about this offline, but it's a very tricky thing to maneuver, and you just do your best trying to go through that, but don't let it stop you, right? Like it shouldn't be the excuse. And yeah, so we're asking for this loan, and my older brother wasn't doing too good at that time, so that car that was co-signed was now under repo under my dad's credit.
Oh my goodness.
So the guy from Wells Fargo, you know, he comes back and he's like, hey, yeah, no go on this loan, but you also got this repo, sir. And my dad is like, that's when he's finding out.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and I'm very like, all right, like, where do I do now, right? Like, and the guy's like, oh, you should just go back to your school and see what they say. I go back to Chapman, and Chapman is like, yo, yours $16,000, right? And like, guys, my family doesn't have money. I don't have money. Like $16,000 might as well have been $1 million, right? Like it would have made no difference.
Jeez.
So that is, I know we talked a little bit, you know, was there a point where you like broke and said, I quit, like I'm done? That was the moment it happened, right? I remember going back from the business office to the dorm and just being I was in the ground, like sobbing, and just being like, I quit, like I'm done. You know, at this point, I've been working my ass off for over 5 years. I've done what I needed to do, and the hard work didn't work. So I'm in the ground. I'm just like.
And you were so close to it too, because you were already in the school.
I was already there. It was like, oh, here's what
I know.
You know, Saul. Here's what you wanted to accomplish.
Oh,
You're already in it, right? And then you get driven away from it, and there's nothing that you can do, right? You're just kind of there, and I'm in the ground, I'm sobbing, and I'm just like, I quit. Like I said that to myself, and it was the first time in my life that I was just like, I'm done. And then funny things happen when you really want to accomplish something. And this is where I tell people is like, quitting is not in me, because I've quit and then I go into what I call autopilot. And that's what happened right after that moment. I went into autopilot. I was like, I gotta keep going. And I woke up the next day, showered, and I went to class. Finished off the semester, did fairly well, and was like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to save $16,000. Cool. Let's get to work. Let's get to saving. for a lot of the people that I was growing up with at that time, they didn't necessarily know what I was going through in the back end, right? Nobody wants to come and be like, yeah, I used to go to Chapman, now I don't, right? And people would love to ask that question. Hey, I thought you were at Chapman, what happened to that? And like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it, right?
Oh my God.
But that was
so left. You left to go save the money? You stopped going, right?
Yeah, and social life. So again, like if I had friends at that time that you like didn't see me, like I just had this other thing that I was chasing. So like going out wasn't a thing anymore. Like I was just like, I need to save every dollar that I possibly can as soon as I can, right? And this is at the end of the spring semester in 2015. I have no idea how long this is gonna take, right? But by the end of that year, I had saved up about like $5,000. And I show up to Chapman, and I'm very naive, right? I'm just like, hey, I had no money before, I got a little bit of money now, what's up? Like, you guys wanna work together? And Chapman was like, that's not how that works, right? Like, you can't do that. And it was the beginning of what was a very long journey, but every time I did that, it was like, not you, right? And I was like, okay, cool, right? Went and started doing my GEs at OCC, South Coast College, and during that experience, I was just trying to get my G's together, save as much money as I possibly could. But every now and then I'd go through that same experience at Chapman, and I'd go and I'd show up, I'd be like, hey, I got $10,000 now, like, what's up? Work with me, right? And they'd be like, nah, not yet. And it wasn't until the fall of 2018, right?
This is how much time has passed now? Since
3 years.
3 years since you left.
3 years.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, it was a 3-year hiatus, guys.
3 years hiatus.
And I like that you paused at that because I always swim over that. I was
like,
oh yeah,
did you
like
miss
3
that?
years of this like
do you realize,
big
like,
struggle and like putting everything to the side and barely having a life and just focus on this one thing. And at the end of that goal, it was like, what is there waiting for you? I was saving just so I could go back.
Do you hear that?
Right, and just pay him what I owed him, not anything
not
new.
Even new.
Yeah, no. So,
oh my God.
Right, talk about like really wanting to accomplish something. And I show up to that school, and I got the 2 checks, and I give it to the lady at the business office, who I gotten to know now, and I'm like, can you please lift the holds off my account so I could come back and enroll in classes, right? And at that point, I had my own credit. I was able to get my own loans. Like, in academics was never an issue, so it was just like smooth sailing from there. And oftentimes, I get the question, why do that, right? Why go through something so costly?
Yes.
Why go to that school, right? Why couldn't, at that point, you could have probably used what you had under your belt and transferred somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it was like, the first time I visited the Chapman campus, I was a freshman in high school, right? And I was learning English, so I sounded like Fez. And I'm in this school that to me looks like the gold standard of anything, right? And I step in there and I'm like, I want to come here. This is where I'm going to come, right? And I get accepted by some Hail Mary pass. And then the school says, no, you don't got enough resources. You don't got enough money. I'm like, all right, cool. And every time I went to try to give them part of the money and they said no, I was like, okay, this school, this thing keeps saying no to me. And it always goes back to like, nah, you're gonna have to come and check in, right? Like, you're gonna have to come and see me. And I drive by that school from time to time, and it wasn't a fun time, right? Like, it was a lot of pain and just bad emotions, but I was always on this like, you're gonna have to come and see me. Like, I'm gonna walk across your fucking stage because I'm gonna do it, right? Like, it is what it is. And it didn't matter how long it was gonna take, it didn't matter how hard it was gonna be. It was just like, we're gonna get to that point, period, right? And in 2020, we got to that point. And it was this surreal moment where a culmination of, because people were like, oh, how long were you in school for? It was like, no, it's not how long I was in school for. It was like, when did you arrive to the States? And when did you graduate? Because that's how long it was of me just like running crazy fast, trying to do everything. So when people are like, how big of a deal was you graduating from school? It was like, fuck, it was over a decade of a lot of work that played into it, right? So it wasn't a culmination of the last 4 or 5 years that I was trying to go to school. It was a culmination of that decade that I had come back from Mexico to the States.
I'm gonna stop you right here.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm taking all this in, and I'm gonna ask you, knowing that you, with your tenacity, no pun intended, but with this tenacity that you have, this determination, this sort of, this ability to, like, for me, it's like, I hope that you recognize your own, like, your own capabilities, your own strength, but what you're made out of, like, and what you're capable of doing now moving forward. Like, do you have a sense of that?
Yeah. Now,
how do you feel about all of this now?
Now, because you do build a lot of confidence throughout these experiences, right? And for people that don't know my story, if you've ever met me and you're like, Saul seems a little arrogant, or Saul seems a little like cocky or something like that. People in my office usually, because I do try to, like, put myself.
You take space, dude. You take space because you've put yourself. You've literally put yourself through all these trials. Yeah. And you've, like.
And those things, when you hear the stories, like, you put this, like, level of respect to it, right? There's no denying, like, oh shit, you, like, had to go through all that. Yeah. Like, that's respectable, right? There's a sense of admiration that comes with it. So now that I walk through the world, right, I walk with the confidence of, this is the mountain I climbed, and the ones that I continue to climb. Yeah. And I've done it already. So to me, it gives me this confidence. So when I have younger people around me, again, it might come off as arrogance or cockiness, but it's not that, guys. It's just like,
what is it for you? What does it mean to you?
It's my experiences. Yeah, it's my experiences. Like, you can go through something like that, and you could do. To me, it's like, you could do whatever you want because you've proven that you're about that smoke, right? You're about that life, right? So to me now, it's like, you put something in front of me, and I'm just like, I compare it to that 10-year journey that I had, and I'm like, if it's not that high, I'm gonna just swim over it, right? Not saying that things in life are just, like, easy now, right? No.
But I feel like people are so afraid to be like, no, like, I believe in myself that much that I'm gonna handle it. I'm gonna manage. I'm gonna be all right. Yeah. I feel like that's the sense I get from you. And, earlier you talked about you live long. I kind of want to wrap it back to what you were saying earlier. Because now this all makes sense the way you see life. Yeah. Because you've lived so much of it already. Yeah.
It does feel like like 20 years compacted into, like, a little period of time. That's what I tell people. It's like, okay, I'm 20, but like 27, but I'm like.
So the next 10 years, Saul, what is sort of the way you feel you're going to, what's the promise you're making to yourself now?
Yeah. And tying it back into, mental health and when I was going through that 10-year journey, it was no stopping at any point. There was no such thing as, like, days off and time off. I did have a little enjoyment with friends at certain points, but for the most part, it was always, like, dead focus. Yeah. When I graduated, I was burnt out, like, as burnt out as someone can be. And I remember the word fatigued entered my vocabulary for the first time ever. I knew what it was like to be tired, right? I was tired all the time. But fatigue is different. And I was fatigued, and it took months, almost a year, to completely get over that. Yeah. And now, I came into what I'm doing now as a financial advisor, which is, it's not an easy career by any means, right? You have to learn so much. There's so many things that you're responsible for, so much pressure that comes with it. Now, me, I'm a little bit crazy. I love pressure. Like, that's my comfort zone, right? Like, we have this saying in our office, like, pressure makes diamonds, and it's like, you put me in a corner.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like, you put me in a corner, and it's like, that's my comfort zone, right? That's where I exist. That's where I shine.
That's where you shine.
Yeah. So that to me is like, okay, this is my comfort zone. But part of what I want to do with my life is push my family line forward, right? Going back to my parents and the community around me, I want to I want to leave the world better than I found it.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, I have to continue to make even more sacrifices, right? All the sacrifices that I did before was just so I could get an opportunity to now be able to do something, right?
Yeah.
So for the next 10 years, I want to continue to work with that same intensity, and I continue to make a lot of sacrifices on my personal life, right? Like people are like, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Like, I don't got time for that. I gotta be laser focused on this if I want this to work, if I want this dream to become a reality. So.
And you're enjoying it, right? You're enjoying it along the way,
Yeah. I tell people, right? I've told you and Anna, I was like, my job is my marriage, right? When people ask me, are you married? I was like, yeah, I'm married to this job, right? Like, this is what I do. This is what makes me happy. This is what makes me angry. This is what I love. This is what I hate. It's who I am today, right?
Yeah.
But now I do work Monday through Saturday, like, and that's a goal for 2023. Like, I was like, if I worked hard last year, I'm working harder this year, and I'm working harder the next year, right? But now I have Sundays where I'm like, you better not ask me about finances. You better not text me. You better not do anything.
You got your boundaries.
Because now Sundays is that rest day, right? That I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is so I don't burn out, right? Like, I don't want to go through that experience of a year of me just kind of recovering from that path. But I do want to continue to put that intensity. And one of the biggest reasons for that is I think about everything that I accomplished from a little frijolito coming from Mexico at 14 to, graduating from school and starting my career as a financial advisor when I was 25. And I was like, look at all that and how impressive that is. Yeah. If we did that another 10 years, think about where we would be the next 10 years, right? And maybe not forever, but just the idea of what could happen in the 10 next years, that's what excites me. And that's what motivates me to be like, let's go through it again, right? Let's go through that same. So even if you get to your deadline and you're like, okay, I went through my struggle, don't shy away from that next obstacle. Like, continue to grow. Growth is this beautiful thing.
So funny. We're gonna end on I like the term growth. It's so important. We were just talking about plants, and I was telling Saul that this cactus right here, it has like how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah.
What do you call them?
Cactus. Cactuses.
Leaves or whatever, or hands or arms, whatever.
Hands.
Stems, hands. Well, it grew. It was in one. The big one, the mama one, was in here. This little guy, and it's been 4 years. We got this in 2019. I remember this from Urbano Wood, which they're great, by the way. And we put it in a bigger pot. And now it's growing slowly, but it's growing. And to think that's, I want to end on that note, because you mentioned earlier about how, like, when you're going for things and you can't really see what's happening. Mm-hmm. But then eventually you brought up the cactus and how similar it is. We're talking about this bamboo, the bamboo tree story, and a lot of you guys might have heard this already, but the bamboo tree, similar to this, is something that you're taking care of for a very long time, daily, right? And you see no progress within it, right? At least with the bamboo story, if I remember it correctly, I think it was like 5 years that you're watering this thing like daily and doing maintenance on it, and it doesn't show anything, right? You're just looking at a dirt, essentially. You're just like, what is this, right? And oftentimes when we're going through very big obstacles in life, it feels very similar to that, right? It's like you'd be working hella hard for a really long time, and you're like, "Where's my tree?" Right? Like, where's the actual result? Yeah. And oftentimes we see people kind of give up because they never see that come to them. And lo and behold, with the bamboo tree, after 5 years of going through this consistency of work, you get this big, amazing tree, but it took the 5 years of hard work, right? For it to blossom.
Yeah. And to highlight Anna, I often compare that analogy to writer's block. It's like, what do you do when you have writer's block, right? It's like, oftentimes, at least when I was in school, I would just sit there and think about what I thought was the next thing.
Right.
And it would feel like, and sometimes I'm dead serious, I would sit there for an hour and nothing would happen. But then I think about like, what if I would have given up in minute 5 and said, okay, we're done. I can't come up with anything. I'll come back to it later. I was like, what if me sitting down for that hour, I was waiting for this new sentence, this word, this idea that was coming from way over there to come and hit me at this time, but I had to sit there for that hour to have that happen. It's like sometimes in life, it's like things don't necessarily happen immediately, even though you're doing the right things. But if you wait long enough, and if you continue to do it long enough, next thing you know, you got a little cactus that looks dope as hell. But
I love that.
You have to go through those motions.
Just wait long enough. Just hang tight, because I think that also applies to love. Like love, not just romantic love, but just love in general. When you feel, especially with mental health, like I always remind people, like it's a quote from a movie, but it's like life brings you to your knees all the time. But if you just hang on a little longer, you turn the corner, love will find you. And I will leave you with that. That's all about tenacity, and thank you for sharing your story. Yeah,
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You talk about being a better person and leaving the world in a better place. I certainly know that if you've watched this coffee chat, you have felt his wisdom and inspiration in his story. And I'll leave your Instagram on the description if you want to follow Saul. What's your username?
Better Call Saul. Yeah, it's not. And I don't have anything like crazy business related. It's the one place that I'm still kind of me, like outside of my work.
So go check him out.
Yeah.
Go see what he looks like outside of a tie.
You might. Yeah, there's still some stuff.
We'll find some of that.
Yeah.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saul.
Yeah. Bye, friends.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on
And then
Saul.
this is what we do. That's a wrap on Saul.
Thank you guys. You guys are so sweet.